Eclipse raises $23 million Series A for battery storage. Bank backing changes the timeline. Noria's stake suggests pre-negotiated offtake agreements that let Eclipse skip the usual developer scramble for sites. Flowstream deployment across 5 countries now risks undercutting slower national utilities on renewable balancing contracts. Those utilities must either match the pricing or watch their grid contracts migrate to the new entrant by mid-2025. Grid operators outside those markets will accelerate their own storage RFPs to avoid similar displacement. Flutterwave valuation hits $3 billion, $25 billion in new round. $3 billion valuations in payments usually precede consolidation, yet the M&A plans here target networks still fragmented by currency controls across West Africa. Local banks in 3 key markets now face the choice of selling or building competing rails before Flutterwave's integration teams arrive. That decision window closes once the first acquisition closes, likely within 9 months. Smaller fintechs without similar scale will find partnership offers drying up fast. Expeditors lays off 230 tech employees. Cutting in-house tech roles this deep usually means the logistics platform moves to off-the-shelf tools within a year. That shift hands leverage to vendors like SAP and Oracle, who can now demand higher maintenance fees, knowing Expeditors won't rebuild internally. Smaller carriers that relied on Expeditors' custom APIs lose their edge and must seek alternatives before the next integration cycle. BBC announces 550 job cuts in savings plan. Regional newsrooms absorb the first cuts even though national audiences drive most digital revenue. That choice leaves local commercial broadcasters with an opening to capture displaced viewers before BBC restores the coverage. The 2-year savings plan makes further rounds in content divisions almost certain once the initial target slips. Producers at independent companies will see fewer commissions as in-house teams shrink. Apple confirms price hikes from chip shortage. Memory costs rising this quarter forces the price adjustment onto iPad and Mac lines first, where margins already run thinner than iPhone. Component suppliers gain the upper hand in negotiations because Cook has signaled the increases publicly. Watch for Samsung to hold its tablet pricing steady and test whether buyers accept the delta. Apple retail partners must now decide whether to absorb part of the increase or pass it through immediately. The DOM, so coated alternatives. Device makers still relying on surface treatments must now either license similar chemistry or publish their own long-term infection metrics to stay competitive. Procurement teams at large systems will likely rewrite RFPs around non-leaching performance within the next 2 quarters. Keysight reports Q2 2026 financial results. Electronics manufacturers waiting on test equipment lead times just got a mixed signal. Strength in select markets points to rising demand for validation tools, yet overall results leave capacity questions unanswered. Chip designers facing longer queues for bench equipment will accelerate plans to qualify alternate suppliers before the end of the year. That shift could dilute the hold on premium service contracts once those second sources come online. Microchip partners with CEAT for hardware training. Engineering departments choosing microcontroller platforms for labs just received a clear nudge on curriculum direction. Faculty now equipped with the latest boards will train students directly on production-grade tools rather than simplified teaching kits. That hands-on exposure typically locks in vendor preference for the first job search cycle, so competing silicon suppliers will need to match the donation scale at other schools or risk losing design wins 2 years out. Chubu Electric invests $141 million in Indian renewables. Japanese utilities still negotiating renewable PPAs in emerging markets now face a new price reference. The capital deployed here secures long-term supply at rates that will likely set the floor for subsequent deals across the region. Other buyers who delay will either pay premiums to catch up or accept shorter contract tenors that increase their exposure to spot volatility. Expect at least 2 more announcements from peer firms inside 18 months. Endo flip technology used in first surgery case. surgeons at peer institutions will now request budget approval for similar imaging catheters once case studies from this procedure circulate. Real-world data on esophageal motility assessments should shorten the typical evaluation cycle from 18 months to under a year at comparable facilities, which now face pressure to guarantee faster deal timelines or lose mandates to Goldman's bench stapling. Watch for those banks to staff up their software calls. That shift hands Goldman an even larger slice of the remaining large-cap software deals next year. Natural Capital Source raises $60 million Series A. Buyers will pay more attention to the data sources behind the platform than to the size of this round. Without exclusive access to high-quality environmental metrics, the new capital buys little advantage. Expect utilities and banks to demand on-site audits in every contract within 18 months. Rivals that cannot match that verification step will see their proposals rejected before pricing even enters the discussion. Smaller platforms face the choice of partnering or exiting the space entirely. Nox Metals raises $11.5 million in funding round. $11 million buys roughly 2 new production lines at current metal prices. Auto suppliers should see qualification cycles shorten by half once those lines run. Larger mills must respelieth here. 96 Tredspler from Inner Corolla line form. Teams Oberware describing should prepare to move their internship budgets toward direct event partnerships or lose first pick of the best builders by next recruiting season. The gap in practical skills will become obvious during first semester lab sessions. Programs without updated shop facilities will lose applicants. PV Module Tech US factory yields, then listening to policy updates. Once those numbers circulate, module buyers gain leverage to demand price concessions from every supplier claiming domestic quality. Manufacturers still reliant on imported cells must either disclose their actual yields or accept lower bids in the next tender cycle. Failure to disclose simply hands the advantage to plants that already publish their numbers. The result shows up in lost contracts within 2 quarters. Zarnova advances infection-resistant device standard. Procurement teams at major hospital groups will add the antimicrobial spec to RFPs starting next year. That timeline forces every competing device maker to either qualify the additive or lose volume to Zarnova licensees. The second-order impact hits coating suppliers hardest. Their legacy surface treatments lose bids once embedded protection becomes table stakes in tenders. Contract manufacturers without the process already face qualification delays that push revenue recognition out by 2 quarters. Chubu Electric expands India renewable footprint. Japanese equipment vendors gain a committed offtake partner that de-risks factory builds aimed at the Indian market. Local developers now have an alternative to Chinese supply chains that still dominate most tenders. The real constraint surfaces in grid interconnection queues, where state utilities must accelerate approvals or leave contracted Japanese capacity stranded. That bottleneck will decide whether the expansion delivers installed megawatts or remains signed paper by late 2025. Expeditors restructures tech workforce. Platform engineering absorbs the reductions first, which keeps customer-facing tracking tools running without immediate feature freezes. Smaller carriers depending on Expeditors API for status updates will see longer turnaround on custom requests. The gap opens space for competitors to pitch direct integrations that bypass the legacy system entirely. Shippers running multi-carrier setups start evaluating those alternatives once response times slip beyond current SLAs. BBC begins content division reductions. Production and research positions account for most of the 200 cuts, so correspondent output holds steady in the near term. The £500 million target still requires equivalent reductions elsewhere, yet newsroom unions will contest every subsequent phase. Freelance and stringer budgets rise to cover the gap, which erodes the headline savings once external invoices replace salary lines. That cost migration becomes visible in next year's content spend reports. Pat McAtoy's Inchapod on Olympia on Rebormlet. Pebble Autopascan Hydokita, Gabe, Pressure.